Elise Martin was left at the altar with nothing but a letter taped to her door. Jake Foster signed his divorce papers in silence after 10 years of a love that slowly disappeared. Neither believed they'd find love again until a glitch in a dating app changed everything. Elise Martin had always been the kind of woman who believed in the beauty of plans. She organized every part of her life with color-coded calendars, detailed spreadsheets, and handwritten to-do lists. She believed that if you followed the steps, life would reward you. So when she met Aaron, charming, dependable, with a smile that felt like safety, she let herself believe the path was unfolding just the way it should. 3 years of dating led to an engagement that lit up her small Nashville community. Everyone knew Elise as the girl who had it all together. The venue was booked, the dress fitted, the invitations mailed. Her wedding was just 7 days away. Then it happened, a Wednesday morning. Elise returned from her final dress fitting to find a single envelope taped to her apartment door. There was no knock, no warning, just a letter, hastily written in Aaron's familiar scrawl. He said he was sorry, said he couldn't do it, said she deserved more than what he had to give. That was it. No phone call. No in-person conversation, no real explanation. In that moment, the world Elise had so carefully built cracked open beneath her. The quiet of the apartment swallowed her whole. She didn't cry at first, not that day, not even the next. Instead, she started canceling things. One by one. The venue, the florist, the photographer. She called her parents, her maid of honor, the pastor. Each call made the truth more real. Some people asked questions, some tried to offer comfort. But Elise didn't have answers, and she didn't want comfort. She wanted to rewind time to undo something she couldn't even understand. It was only after all the details were done that the grief found her. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It came in small moments, standing in the aisle of a grocery store, hearing a love song on the radio, catching sight of the dress she never got to wear. It was the kind of heartbreak that felt invisible to the outside world, but inside, it sat heavy like a stone on her chest. Nights were the worst. She'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone who once promised forever could disappear so completely. Wondering if she'd missed the signs, wondering if she was broken in a way that love couldn't fix. 1,000 miles away, Jake Foster's story was quieter but no less painful. After a decade of marriage, he and his wife had grown into polite strangers. There was no betrayal, no screaming matches, no final blowout. Just a growing distance, like fog creeping into the corners of their lives until neither of them could see the other clearly anymore. When they finally sat down to talk, they both knew the end had already arrived. The papers were signed in silence. Jake moved out, taking only a few boxes and a guitar he hadn't played in years. He didn't cry either, not at first. Both Elise and Jake found themselves alone in the aftermath of plans that never played out. Both were left trying to make sense of how love could fade, vanish, or walk away without warning. They didn't know it then, but their separate heartbreaks were the first quiet steps towards something neither of them expected, a love that would eventually rewrite everything they thought they knew. In the weeks that followed the collapse of her wedding plans, Elise moved through life in slow motion. Nashville, once full of warm memories and familiar streets, now felt like a city of ghosts. Every corner reminded her of something she had lost: a coffee shop where she and Aaron used to sit and plan their future, a park bench where he had first told her he loved her. She began avoiding entire neighborhoods, taking the long way to work, then eventually quitting her job altogether. The office, once a place where she felt capable and seen, became unbearable. The sympathetic looks, the whispered conversations, the questions she didn't want to answer, it was too much, so she left. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Elise packed her car with the essentials and drove east to Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't part of a grand plan. It was just far enough away to feel like starting over, but close enough to return if everything fell apart. Asheville welcomed her with foggy mornings, quiet bookstores, and winding mountain roads. She found a small apartment above a used record shop and took a job as a part-time barista. It wasn't the life she had pictured, but for the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel suffocating. It felt like space to breathe. Jake, on the other hand, stayed where he was. Portland had always been home, and even though it held memories of his marriage, it also held his routine. After the divorce, he threw himself into work at the bookstore, often staying late to restock shelves or help customers find something comforting to read. He didn't talk much about what had happened. Most of his friends knew, but no one pushed. At night, his apartment felt hollow, filled with a silence that stretched too far in every direction. He tried dating again, more out of curiosity than hope. He downloaded a few apps, had coffee with strangers, and made polite conversation that went nowhere. Nothing clicked. The spark he used to feel just wasn't there. In an effort to fill the emptiness, Jake began volunteering at a youth center nearby. He taught guitar to teens once a week, rediscovering parts of himself he had long forgotten. The kids didn't care about his past, they just wanted someone to show up, to listen, to teach. Slowly, the act of giving his time and attention to others started to pull him out of the fog. He wasn't healed, not even close, but something was shifting. Elise began writing again, something she hadn't done since college. It started with small journal entries, just thoughts, questions, pieces of pain that didn't fit anywhere else. But the more she wrote, the more she understood what she had been through. The writing didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it shape, gave her power over it. Both Elise and Jake were rebuilding, piece by piece, far apart and unaware of each other. They didn't know their paths would one day cross, or that healing would come not just through time, but through a connection neither of them were looking for. For now, they were just learning how to live again. It happened late on a Thursday night. Jake was lying on his couch, half watching an old movie, half scrolling through a dating app he hadn't opened in weeks. He didn't expect much from it, any more just habit at this point. Most of the profiles blurred together, faces paired with the same tired phrases. But then, something different caught his eye. A photo of a woman laughing at a street fair, cotton candy in one hand, wind pushing her hair across her face. It wasn't a posed, filtered image. It looked real. He paused, read the short profile. Her name was Elise. She lived in North Carolina. That alone should have meant the app wouldn't show her his location preferences were set to people within 50 miles of Portland. But here she was, somehow, like a glitch in the system. He hesitated before swiping right. It made no sense. The distance alone made it impractical. But something about her photo made him curious, and he figured it couldn't hurt. He didn't expect a match. But when the notification appeared seconds later, it felt like something had shifted. It was the first moment in a long time that made him feel slightly more awake. Elise saw the message the next morning. She almost deleted it without reading. Her profile was barely complete, something she had set up on a whim one night when loneliness crept in too strong to ignore. She hadn't planned on using it, hadn't thought seriously about dating again. But when she opened the message, she found herself reading it twice. It wasn't too flashy or clever, just a kind hello and a question about the book she had listed as her favorite. It was simple, genuine. She replied without overthinking. Their first conversations were cautious, no deep confessions, no flirting. They talked about books, favorite comfort meals, childhood vacations, little pieces of themselves that felt safe to share. For both of them, the conversations became something they looked forward to. There was no pressure, no expectations, just someone who listened. As the days passed, they started messaging more frequently. They traded stories, photos of their pets, even short videos of the places they loved in their towns. Neither mentioned their pasts right away. The weight of their previous heartbreaks still lingered close to the surface. But in each message, they built something new, thin threads of trust stretching across the country. Then came the unexpected question. Jake asked if she'd ever consider meeting in person, not right away, but maybe someday. Elise surprised herself by saying yes. The idea of traveling to meet someone she barely knew would have once terrified her. But this didn't feel reckless. It felt like a risk worth taking. They chose Denver as their meeting point, a city in the middle, neutral ground. Neither had ever been there before, and that felt right. New place, new story, no shadows from the past. It was only a plan, but in making it, something quietly profound took root. Without meaning to, and without really trying, they had begun to hope again. The plane landed in Denver on a chilly Friday afternoon. Elise stepped off with her heart pounding harder than she expected. She had packed lightly, told only her closest friend about the trip, and kept her expectations low. But still, she couldn't stop the swirl of nerves in her stomach. As she walked toward the baggage claim, she scanned the crowd, unsure of what exactly she was hoping to feel when she saw him. Then, there he was, taller than in his photos, hands in his pockets, eyes searching. When their eyes met, they both smiled, not wide or dramatic. Just something quiet and real, like a sigh of relief. The first hour was awkward. They stumbled over words, laughed nervously, and checked their phones more than necessary, but slowly the tension eased. They shared lunch at a tiny cafe tucked into a side street, their conversation picking up where their messages had left off. They talked about how strange it felt to meet someone they'd already begun to trust without ever having heard their voice in person. The afternoon turned into evening, and before they knew it, they were wandering through an art museum, standing in front of paintings and saying things they hadn't planned to share. Elise told him how hard it had been to leave Nashville, how every decision afterward had felt like walking in the dark. Jake spoke of the quiet in his apartment after his divorce, how he had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen by someone. There was no pressure to impress each other, no attempt to fix or rescue. Just two people sharing their broken parts with someone who seemed to understand. The second day was easier. They rented bikes and explored the city together, stopping at a farmer's market and trying foods neither had tasted before. They laughed more freely, not at anything in particular, just from the joy of being around someone who made them feel comfortable. In the afternoon, they hiked a nearby trail, the mountains rising like sentinels in the distance. It was there, standing at a quiet overlook, that something shifted. They didn't say anything profound. They just stood side by side, watching the sun melt into the peaks. And in the silence, a new kind of peace settled between them. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was slow and steady, like a door quietly opening inside each of them. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a fleeting connection. That evening, they sat on the floor of Elise's hotel room, sharing slices of pizza and listening to music on her phone. They didn't talk about the future, didn't make promises. But when Jake reached over and gently took her hand, Elise didn't flinch. She didn't think about what had come before. She didn't worry about what might come after. In that moment, she just held on. It was only a weekend, but it felt like a beginning. Not a restart, not a return to something lost, but a quiet beginning to something neither of them had dared to believe in again. When Elise returned to Asheville, everything looked the same, but nothing felt quite like before. The quiet corners of her apartment no longer echoed with emptiness. Instead, they carried traces of laughter and long talks in Denver. She kept replaying the weekend in her mind, not because it was perfect, but because it felt real. The way Jake looked at her, not with expectation, but with kindness. The way their silences had felt full instead of awkward. It was unlike anything she had experienced, and yet it didn't overwhelm her. It felt gentle, possible. Back in Portland, Jake couldn't stop thinking about her. He had known the moment he left the airport that something inside him had changed. The walls he had built around his heart were still there, but now they had windows. For the first time since his divorce, he caught himself smiling for no reason, humming while stocking shelves, finding moments in the day that felt lighter simply because she existed somewhere out there. They began talking every day, long calls, short texts, voice notes, even letters when they felt like slowing time down. They shared the small things, the books they were reading, the songs that got stuck in their heads, the frustrations of their day. And in between, they shared the deeper things, the fears, the lingering insecurities. Elise worried that she was still too broken, that love would leave her again. Jake feared that distance would erode the connection, that he wouldn't be enough to keep it going. But they didn't hide these fears. They spoke them out loud and then kept showing up anyway. They made time to visit each other, once a month at first, then more often. They explored each other's cities, met each other's closest friends, began weaving their separate lives together bit by bit. It wasn't easy. Long distance came with its challenges: missed flights, time zone confusion, the ache of not being able to share a simple morning cup of coffee. But despite the hurdles, they chose to keep going. Not out of obligation, but because something between them felt worth fighting for. After a year of traveling back and forth, Elise made the choice to move to Portland. It wasn't impulsive. It was a decision made slowly, carefully, with intention. She found a small place near Jake's, kept her barista job part-time, and started freelancing her writing. She began publishing essays, pieces of her story, and was surprised when readers responded, telling her they saw themselves in her words. Her pain had become something useful, something healing. 2 years after that first message on a broken dating app, they stood in Jake's backyard on a crisp autumn afternoon. Friends gathered around them. Elise wore a soft blue dress, and Jake strummed his guitar before the ceremony began. There were no grand speeches, just quiet vows, exchanged under twinkle lights and falling leaves. They promised not to be perfect, but to be honest, not to fix each other, but to hold space for each other's scars. Their story didn't begin in fairy tale fashion, it began in heartbreak. But it grew. Not in spite of their pain, but through it. And in the end, they didn't just find love, they built it together.